Welcome to Soulful Practices podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Holling Brooks, and over the past 20 years, I have been on a journey of healing and awakening. I'm also a coach and practitioner for clients on their journey of unbridling their true self. The number one question I'm asked is, what meditation or practice will help me reach my goals? While there is no one meditation or secret mantra that will unlock our own awakening, there is a doorway that will lead us there. And that's the doorway of learning and cultivating the skills of self-reflection and contemplation. Each episode of this podcast offers you pocket teachings and practices that you can implement right away to help you courageously connect with living your authentic soul-led life. Let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of Soulful Practices. And in this episode, we are continuing our exploration of season 2, where we are working on the main focus, are empowering ourselves with practices and support that intentionally bring our awareness and therefore our flow and engagement to cultivating more love and compassion. And we really need that right now, especially in the world today at large. And so the teacher that I have for this quote for this episode is another quote from the spiritual teacher who's best known for his Buddhist principles and wisdom teachings, Jack Kornfield. And he has quoted being said, in the end, just 3 things matter: how well we lived, how well we have loved, and how well we have learned to let go. So those are the 3 things that come together to really, that's what matters. That's what brings forward in there. And I would like to invite us to reflect on some of the questions that are held within this beautiful invitation from Jack Kornfield, that the 3 things that matter. And so when I feel into this, the questions that I feel coming forward from my heart kind of bubbling up is to ask me to lean into, what is keeping me from living fully? From engaging and loving fully. What would even that look like? So what would living and loving well, what would that look like? What would that feel like? What would the expression of that be within my body and within my life, right? And then, am I living and loving well in my life right now? So it's kind of this global thing of like, what would that even look like? What would that sound like? What would that feel like? What would that, like smell like? If we bring all of our 5 senses that we worked on in episode 15 and we start to bring those in, just really what would that be like to say, how well have I lived? How well have I loved? And how well have we learned to let go? And in that, am I doing that right now? Like bringing it from that big kind of global idea and then asking it to come down into, what is my experience right now in this moment, right? So going from that esoteric thing down to the nuts and bolts. And also, please know that I'm not just talking about romantic love in this episode or having passion for a cause or an activity. As we explored in episode 15, to love well is to engage. It's the very way we move out into the world, right? And it's in everything that we do, from our inner work to our relationships with our friends and our family, our relationship with our career, our coworkers, our physical body, and the health and well-being that we have, rooted with our body, our mind, our heart, and our soul. I consider all of that in that relationship and genre of love. And Jack answers these reflective questions with a indication. He's like shining a flashlight when I hear this quote on what are the reasons that we only partially live, or we only partially allow ourselves to engage and love and moving from love, and being centered and living and loving, quote unquote, well. And that is our ability with our willingness to let go or not, right? And are we willing to let go of the different things that we absolutely love, that were beautiful, that were amazing, that were something we couldn't imagine our life without? Are we willing to hold those lightly so that they can be in their original cycle? And if they're gone, are we still holding on to the, quote, glory days of that moment and trying to compare every moment to that moment? And then what is the cost of that? Are we willing to release our attachments and to let go of what happened to us or another that caused us pain or suffering or trauma? Can we honor that, tend to those parts of ourselves, and then also allow ourselves to move into what could be present? Or are we holding on to that so that therefore there's no space, there's no room, there's no ability for the present or the future that wants to be a part of us, that wants to dance with us, engage with us, and be a part of our living and loving well? So is that one place that we might be getting gummed up? The other main place that I see a lot of myself and other clients get stuck in is that, are we willing to let go of our attachments of what didn't happen? So there's a saying in the trauma world that trauma is not just what happens to us, it's also what doesn't happen to us. So the absence of an attuned connection, the absence of feeling that those parental roles are able to meet us in those moments and see us and hear us and validate us and engage with us, that somebody was there when we were lost or confused or overwhelmed. And so it's not just the experiences that we have, it's also trauma to our nervous system not being able to get what it needs when it needs it. And that too, that's what didn't happen, right? And so that can cause us pain and suffering and, quote, dis-ease within our whole body being, right? And so are we holding on to the attachments of what could have, what should have, what we wish would have happened? And are we letting that get in the way of us living and loving well? So the art of letting go is an essential ingredient in living, loving, and leading our authentic life. So this is like the tagline out here at Unbridled Change. When people ask me, Michelle, what type of healing and spiritual growth and wellness services do you offer? And I say, well, I help people fully live first, like get back in their life, because what happens when we're stuck in either chronic illness or disease or trauma or just that ocean of pain that separates us is that we start chunking down our life. We start only partially living. We're surviving. We're moving one foot in front of the other, but we're not living fully. So like step one is like to re-engage that willingness within our system, that trust, that worth of my life and the experiences and the choices that I can have. Once I can learn to like accept and be willing to live my life, like put my energy back into my feet, so to speak, and say, okay, in this life, just as it is right now, without an influx of time or money, how do I want to engage with it? How do I want to partner with it? How do I want to start? And this is the next section that comes on board, loving. How do I want to start loving my life? Like, this is when we do an audit. We look around and we're like, wow, in those moments of partial living, of disembodiment, of just going through the motions and one foot falling in front of the other and blindly saying yes to things and saying no to things that we really, really want, but parts of us are too afraid. We're moving from fear. Now I have that capacity because I'm actually in my body, just 51%. We don't have to be perfect in here. Now I have that capacity to start to really lean in and say, what is it that I want? What is it that lights me up? What is it that brings me passion? And if we're holding on to what was or what wasn't there or what happened to us, then there's no room to move into loving, right? And so to fully love, to ask ourselves that question and edit our life, that becomes that next stage, right? And then once we start to allow ourselves to engage with this idea that we're going to open up our heart, we're going to become vulnerable when our heart is open, and we're going to start to make those choices, those inward choices, those outward choices, and we're going to start to edit our life. Let go of that which is no longer serving, which at one point did, but now it doesn't, and start to call in that which will support me, nurture me, nourish my life, nourish all the pieces. So we're living fully, we're starting to open up to loving. Now we're willing to start to lead. Right? And so that's why the words go in the order that they do in my tagline. And when I talk to other people is we've got to be willing to live first, get back in our life, stop being the little balloon around it, and honoring that there are very good reasons why we got kicked out. There are very good reasons why we went into just survival mode. And can we start to love ourselves and our potential of our life? Can we honor that? Can we esteem that enough to be willing to reclaim it? Once we can reclaim that, then we can start to honor loving and creating a life that we fully love, right? And to do that, we have to be willing to lead our authentic life, which means we're going to kind of butt up against some really rough moments where what is optimal for us maybe goes against what somebody else's thoughts, wants, wishes, or expectations are. What's going to happen in that moment, right? And are we going to stay attached to maybe their expectations, what they want, or are we going to let that go? And if we let that go, oh, this is the tricky part. So the hidden pieces that's in this quote is that the things in our life, the people in our life, when we start living fully, when we start loving fully, when we start leading a life that is authentic to us, things shift. We start to engage with things knowing that everything has permission to come and go, right? And so one of the main topics I always invite my clients to lean into is this idea, this invitation to develop a true partnership with what I call a grief practice. And we all have a grief practice, whether we know it or not. The question is, how does that grief practice help us, or how does it really gum us up and hurt us? And does our current relationship with our grief practice match the intentions that we're coming up with, right? So just like when I said this is not just romantic relationships, grief is more than the loss of a loved one, whether that be a human being or an animal companion or another type of being. It's more than just the loss of somebody that we care about and that they are physically dead, right? It is grief and loss comes in so many of our different daily experiences. The big ones are like the ending of a job that maybe we totally knew was coming, but maybe we didn't know. We showed up one day and pink slips, huge layoffs, or, the company's changing, this, that, and the other. Maybe it's an ending of a relationship. Again, sometimes we create that, and sometimes it just comes in. It could be disappointment in realizing that an expectation that we really want and we really felt good about in something else is happening, right? That's contrary to that expectation. It can come through the ways of understanding that someone doesn't have the same code of conduct. Like that moment when we realize, oh, wow, the way I'm showing up in this exchange and the way they're showing up in this exchange, they don't match. And so they're not as committed to the same level of healthy repair work as I am. And what does that mean? What does that mean for me? And if I step into honoring, loving, and leading my authentic life, and I don't blur boundaries and I hold to healthy boundaries, that person might not be in my life anymore, right? And so it's about understanding that grief is a part of living. Working with grief, welcoming grief, partnering with grief, and allowing it to be a part of us. And oh man, is this just tricky, right? Like we just naturally, our mind does not want to work with the unpredictable, right? It wants to be able to predict it. If a loss is coming, it wants to know who, what, when, where, and why that loss is coming. So then it can, quote, accept it, and then it can move on. Then it can let go, right? But what if we can't answer all those questions? And what if you're just asked to be in that unknown, to be in that tricky spot of maybe you know that a loved one is on the roads to the end of their life path, right? And you can know that. However, when that moment comes, there's a tricky spot right there, right? The loss of that physical form, even if we know it moves on, it's still a loss. So what our mind wants to do is walk quickly. It wants to sprint its way through the grief and the loss energy and pop out on the other side, right? And get back to the things that it can predict. So if something's about ready to die, it would rather just stride on out, lob its head off, and then keep on trucking, and it doesn't maybe want to work with the time that's in between that, right? And I get this, man. Grief and loss is something that is not clean. It's not simple. It's messy. It's unpredictable, which means the mind doesn't like it. It's irrational, which means the mind doesn't like it. And it just comes in a way that really creates a lot of uncomfortableness because we never know when that wave is going to come in. We don't know when we're going to be reminded of the loss of what was, right? I had a client who was really brilliant, and she describes this. I forget where she had heard it. She had told me originally where she heard it, so I apologize. I don't know who to originally give this credit to, but when she told it to me, I was like, that is such a brilliant one. She described grief as like this like button, like the Staples Easy button, and it's kind of sitting there, and it's just one size, and then there's a box around, but the box is really tight and really like close to it in the very beginning. So there's a little ball in this box that can kind of move around, but in the very beginning of grief, it's just really close. And so it whacks in to that button of that grief wave more and more because it's just close, right? And as the capacity to be with that, to move with that, to move into the next stage. It's not that the buzzer gets smaller because the grief is the grief. It's that the box, the capacity, the bandwidth for our system to breathe through that wave and to engage with more of the life around us, that is what increases. And so every once in a while, yes, that ball is still rolling around, but it has a whole lot more surface area where it's not going to buzz into that, right? But every once in a while, it does. And when that comes, it's not that anybody did anything wrong or anything like that. It just happens to hit it and coincide with it, right? And I love that metaphor. If that metaphor and imagery is helpful for you, if you're getting really stuck in a grief and loss cycle, I hope that that's helpful to you because it's uncomfortable. We don't like to work with it. There were parts of me that I remember when I very first started working with grief and loss, and especially in the practitioner role, that I felt that it was really my job to lift the spirits of the person around me, to help them feel a little bit lighter and to be able to be in that feeling of the room of a bigger box, right? And to be strong for them. If it was on the personal side, like I need to be strong for them. I need to not acknowledge my little buzzer that's in here, and I need to be able to hold that space for them without having any of my own sentiments get in there. And so I had armed myself with some of these really beautiful, sentimental one-liners and see if any of these sound familiar to you. Like there's a season for everything. We can love what was and also move into what is. Sending prayers of comfort and love. Life goes on, and so will we, and so will they. Just take it one day at a time. It gets easier. Choose to forgive and to forget. Give yourself that gift, right? And then there was the more comfort-oriented statements instead of like the little fortune cookie ones. There's a reason for everything. You just can't see it yet. We just don't know it yet. So it's giving a little trinket to the mind that says, oh, eventually there is a rational reason why what is happening, right? That sometimes loss is for the best. Like again, we're trying to give a cookie to that little gremlin in our mind to say there is a reason and that we are paving the way for blessings yet to come, and couching things in those ones. Well, why there's truth in all of these statements, we're often giving these statements with attachments. And those attachments are hidden attempts to sidestep and to bypass the most uncomfortable moments of those waves coming and going. That button getting rolled over by that ball and pushing that in that wave of grief, that wave of sadness, that wave of isolation, the wave of wishing and wanting and like bartering, right? All these different ways in which we find ourselves present with emotion that when we're holding that space for either ourselves or for somebody else, what those waves are waking up Is they're waking up all the unmet needs of other moments of me that were hurt, that never got to fully engage in grief, that have protectors around them. And so, yeah, we want to move fast through here because it's just whacking into a bunch of stuff, right? And in those moments when those emotions are present, we really have two choices. We can lean in and we can take that breath and say, this wave is here. What else is present? We can embrace that growth that is present within those statements. Or we can try to have that statement, put a band-aid on it, and keep on trucking, right? So if we let ourselves really pause, the reason why we don't do it, and the reason why in this quote, Jack Kornfield is saying like, hey, the the art of letting go is one of the things that matters, because if we really allow ourselves to pause, to go through the process of letting go, that's why it says the art of letting go, because it's not just simply a mental, oh, I've let it go. There's a whole system here. If we really allow ourselves to pause and give ourselves permission to be with like what else is here, we're going to find laughter. Oh, remember this moment, right? We're going to find tears. We're going to find anger. We're going to find confusion. We're going to find doubts. Did I miss something? Should I have done something? Could I have said this? What, those regrets, those fears, those loss. We might even find resentments, right? Towards ourselves or maybe towards the other for creating that hemorrhage and that loss. We're also going to find love and compassion and forgiveness, right? And so all of those energies are really kind of problematic if we don't feel that we innately have the capacity to work with those waves, right? And to see them coming and to going. In traditional Chinese medicine, the five element system, which I'm a practitioner of, the system of grief and loss belongs to the metal element. And in that metal element, it represents that bittersweet energy that comes with the ending of a cycle. And I'll put a little PDF of what the five element model looks like. So in case you're like me and you want to know why everything does what it does and all that good stuff, you can have that. But when we're in that metal element, it's asking us, it's a part of the cycle of creation, right? And so it's asking us to reflect, to kind of zoom out and see that bigger picture of the whole cycle that we've been through, to enjoy the harvest, to reap the benefits of what we were able to experience and produce and create in that time frame, right? Like that cycle. It allows us to really honor that. And it also asks us to say goodbye, to let go to that particular cycle so that we can open up to a new one. And this cycle is not just happening in the different rhythms of the season, because that the metal element is related to the autumn season. When I feel into the different rhythms, it's each day, right? We could even take it down to each moment. We can take it across a project, from the idea of the inspiration coming in and how it comes down through our system, and we give it form, right? And that form, like any incarnation, has a beginning, a middle, and an end to it, right? And so when in that metal element, we're asked to embrace that, to be in that honoring, laughter, love, abundance, look at that, see that, and then also at the same time softening our grip on that, recognizing that that had its moment, it was what it was when it was there, and now we need to let go, so that we can allow ourselves to have the next rhythm come in. So within the metal element, there are two meridians. Most of the elements have two meridians in it. The fire element is special. It has 4 meridians in that one. And inside them, each one, there is what is called a yin, which is attributed to, quote, feminine, and yang, which is masculine energy. However, I would like to soften the gender identification of these and just put in that the yin energy is going inward. It's asking us to expand and soften and open up to the essence, the movability, the changeability, the creation, the inspiration, the feeling tones, the felt sense, right? And that yang energy is the container in which that can be held in. And the yang energy wants to create structure, stability, security, and the way that we need, the very formation that we need to be able to interact with something. Because the yin element is much more of a feeling and a sensation that doesn't have form. And in order for us to connect, in order for us to exchange and be in that, part of this cycle of where we find ourselves in this life is asking ourselves to engage with the form and also to let that form shift and change, hence letting go, right? So the yin element within the metal the yin meridian, sorry, within the metal element is lung meridian. And so it's, if you haven't worked with meridians before, just a quick little sidebar, because I always get like sidetracked in podcasts and I pause it and I go over and like do the thing because I have a strong metal element that I want to understand the bigger picture of how everything works together, is that it's not just our physical lungs. It also correlates with that idea of the inspiration, that air within us that comes in and allows us to gain new insights, something new to come into our system, to infuse it, to support it, that is beyond us, right? It's interconnected into all that is. And so it works with more things than just the actual physical organ that the meridians are named after, just FYI. And the yang element is associated with the large intestine in the metal element, right? And so the large intestine meridian. So the lungs itself represent metaphorically, energetically in the subtle energetic fields, our connection to life itself, right? With each breath cycle, we are literally in the process of opening, right? Just take a breath in right now. Whatever feels good to you, don't force it to be like this big, huge breath if that doesn't feel good to you, but just feel that. You can feel the ribs expand out. We have this huge bellows that are able to open, and we can receive. I am within my own system. I have air within here, right? It's moving around, it's doing its thing. But when I breathe in, I'm choosing to receive. Some part of me is opening and willing and able to say, yes, I want to receive support. I want to receive some ideas, some inspiration, a new way of being, of thinking, of perceiving. I want to receive that which my system needs to nourish us, to enrich us, right? So when we take that breath, we're really opening up to this trust that the breath that we're breathing is going to nourish us, and that our system knows what to do with it in its own innate wisdom. It knows how to take that breath and transmute it into energy and fuel and nourishment and sustainability. So it can go wherever it wants to go in the system. And as we exhale, that's the process of releasing what once served. That breath in and how it went through my whole body served my body. However, if it remains in my body at that point, after it's gone through its transmutation, it becomes toxic. And so we have to exhale the toxicity of that which is the trade-off of what once served us now no longer does, and we exhale. We constrict the system, the ribs come down, push, 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 out it goes, and we let go. And there's this funny little space in between both the in-breath and the out-breath. And I'd love for you to just, while I'm talking about this, just explore those spaces, metaphorically in between. I breathe in, I pause, right? There's a little pause that wants to be there. If our breath is feeling free, if it's feeling relaxed, if it's feeling open, if it's feeling very willing, it's natural to have a pause in between the in and out breath. Now, if I'm not feeling relaxed, if I'm not feeling at ease, if I'm not feeling nurtured, if I'm not feeling trusting, these little pause moments go away, right? And in that moment of that pause, that is that space where our system gets to live. It gets to explore, it gets to meander around, right? And then as we go into that next cycle, it allows that exhale. And again, there's a pause in between the cycles and then an in breath. And it is that moment, it's that passing from one creation cycle to the next, right? It's that passing of the baton, it's that shaking of the hand. It's allowing our system to work in rhythms with the ebb and the flow. The receive, allow it to nurture, release. Allow the pause, the honoring. Breathe in again, allowing that to come in and out. So it's that willingness, the pauses represent a willingness to begin again, right? A willingness to trust. And how do we want to begin again? That's another great question when we start to work with breath work, that as a metaphor for what's happening in our system and using our breath as a tool to see it, like just tracking what the breath is up to on its own without trying to change it or adjust it. And then inviting it into a new rhythm. Like after we see what it's up to, we say, hey, what would it feel like if we could let a little bit longer exhale come in here? Does that feel supportive to my system? Does that not feel supportive, right? And as this yin element of the lungs is associated with the emotions of grief, along with our ability to surrender. So you can feel how there is a lot of trust. There's trust in the air that I'm receiving. There's trust that the body is going to be able to utilize it and do what it needs to do. There's trust in that exhale that the next in breath is going to come in to meet me, that there's going to be support there for me if we really just take ourselves out of the physical form and go into the metaphoric, right? And so that ability for us to surrender to inspiration, that I can't control when I'm going to be inspired. I can't control what is going to happen in that connection with that intuition, that I'm willing to yield my own personal attachments to this is what I want the breath to do, and instead open up to what is the breath inviting me into. And so that's releasing that personal attachments to having faith in the bigger picture versus our own personal attachments, wants, and wishes. This is what I think my breath should be doing or shouldn't be doing. This is what my life should or should not be doing, right? And so a balanced lung energy in our system is not just asking, can my lungs work in a healthy capacity way? It's really when you're tapping in and working with that meridian, you're opening up to its willingness to hold things lightly and at the same time, in a paradoxical way, deeply engage, work with, allow yourself to be in that enmeshment with what is happening in and around our system. And how do I want to be with that? What is present? What is present to be engaged with, and what is also present to be released? And can I trust in that timing is a part of it that might or might not match my personal ideas of what that time is, right? And so that's the metaphor of lung intestine. The metaphors with large intestine, lung intestine, sorry. Okay, lung meridian. And then large intestine works as that yang component, providing in that structure, right? That stability, that support that comes from our creation. And I always like to think of it, if you're working with the lung, it's like this is the rib cage that comes around, right? Without the ribs moving in and out, allowing that space for that diaphragm, all of that stuff, the lungs themselves don't move. They don't have the ability to function on that. They need that movement of the structure coming in and out. And that's what creates the billow effect, right? And so the same thing goes for that large intestine meridian. Like it's the structure that helps us be able to engage and to work with the inspiration that's coming in. Are we willing to trust the system to have that ebb and the flow? And if we look at like biologically what large intestine is up to in a very simple form, it's at the end of the digestive system. We have our esophagus, we put food in, the tongue in the esophagus, it comes down, it hits, the stomach first, it's held within the stomach as a container to just start, just like to help start to to soften it, to give it a container as a place to be. And then from there, it starts to move in to the small intestines, where there it starts to get broken down, and we start to make choices of like, hey, of all these good things that are in here, what will really serve us? What do we want to pull in and start to turn into nutrients and support and energy within our system to build the chain blocks of healthy cells and all those other things that our body needs to do, right? And then from there, it goes into the intestines of the large intestines, both the ascending and descending, and then on out, right? And in that last bit, it's doing the last kind of sort. This is what we want to absorb from this, and this is what we want to release. So that final look at what really from this cycle is going to be supportive for me to glean off of this, and then what would be beneficial for me to release. And that's the process that grief organically is a part of our day. Like every single day when this meridian comes around, it's saying, hey, we've gone through all the cycles. We've absorbed that which we need from this day, from those exchanges, from those different moments. Now it's time to let go. Now it's time to trust that the next thing we need that's going to help us, support us, give us the structure that we need to live and love fully, right? So that we can lead a life that's authentic to us, that's going to come forward to us if we release. And that's going to be a part of our moments if we allow it to be, right? And so that's both the planned and unplanned, right? The ones that come in from left field and the ones that we're executing our personal plan around. And it reminds us in this large intestine energy that the one thing that we can count on is that there is just impermanence, meaning that the world around us is constantly changing. So if we don't allow ourselves to receive and we don't allow ourselves to release, to let go that which we have received, our system is going to become super overwhelmed, super congested, super restricted, bloated, toxic. And there is a great story and a metaphor that I heard years and years ago. It was back when I was working in the juvenile probation office, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. But I was at a conference one time, and there was a therapist who worked specifically with like male inmates that were both juveniles and adults. And this concept of allowing ourselves to process our emotions, he had to figure out a way to pitch it to a bunch of people that historically probably didn't think too kindly of this idea of releasing and emotions. And so he was shared with us how he brings this topic into a room that probably is not super open to it, right? It's not somebody who's coming in and saying, hey, I want to learn how to partner with my emotions. That's not the room that he was reading when he went in there to talk about emotional releases. And so he said in his talk that this is the story that he would give at the beginning of every single group that he ran. He would go up to the whiteboard, he would draw these little stick figures that go with it, and he would tell the story. And I'm going to give you my version of it that I do use even now, but on both sides of my client work. When we're working with our juveniles out here through the equine partnered psychotherapy side, and or if we're working in the energy work, coaching, and personal growth side, because I think it's just a great metaphor. So imagine that there's a little person, and if I was good at drawing on whiteboards while recording, I would do this, but I'm not. So imagine that there is a little person, right? And this little person is just going throughout their day, consuming things, eating things, drinking things, just like normal people do. However, there's something very different about this little being. They're not processing, so that all the stuff that I talked about the digestive system doing, it's not doing it. It's not holding it or breaking down or do anything like that. It's just like sitting there like a lump in the person's system, in this little beings. And everything that they're eating and everything that they're drinking is just sitting in their system, not breaking down, not releasing, not doing anything. Eventually, what's going to happen to that little being? And this is where clients raise their hand and they go, man, it would burst. And then you can show this little stick figure going, right? And so the intestines you can only stuff them so full. The stomach can only get stuffed so full. And everything, and so everything would burst. And now the intestines have burst, and all of that food matter and everything else like that is going into the cavity of the abdomen of the person. I probably should have said trigger warning with the story. Sorry about that. And now the system's going septic, right? It's like all toxic, and eventually I draw a little person with little X's on their eyes, and it's like no more person, right? And then we draw the line that hops them over to the next thing. And that is literally the same thing that happens to us if we don't process, break down, receive the nutrients of that which is we've experienced emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and then release our attachment to the rest. If we don't do that, if we don't allow that process to happen, our system gets overwhelmed. We become emotionally constipated. We become emotionally bloated. And yes, we explode. Something comes into our world, and all that pressure, all that energy, it's got to go somewhere. And we end up like emotionally word salad vomiting on somebody else, or bleeding out, quote unquote, hemorrhaging on them, and it comes out sideways. It comes out in a way that doesn't feel good to us, that's not true, that's not us leading our authentic life. So I just thought that story would be really great imagery, and feel free to make it your own and use it if you work with clients. So when large intestine is out of balance, we are having a really tricky relationship with control. Ultimately, that's what we're up to. We are trying to either micromanage and control everything and make sure it's all going to happen the way we want it to happen, or we're going hands off. We're abdicating that we have any responsibility or influence over what we actually do. And so then we're passing it through fast. So if we want to stay in the physical, we're either constipated or we're slingshotting the other way, and everything's moving too fast through our system, right? Or we're not even willing to like consume it and bring it in. So the other interesting piece that I find when we glean from the wisdom of the 5 element system is that the metal element is associated with our mind, right? So the water element is associated with our form and the innate intelligence of our body, mind. The wood element is associated with our ability to step into conviction, to make a plan, to carry out that plan, to create, to move, like think of chopping wood. Like I'm taking something from one form and I'm choosing to put it into another form. That fire element is associated with our passions, our heart, how we want to like really light ourselves up and be in that dance, in that connectivity, in that movement, in that transformation of taking something from a closed system and engaging it with that fire element within ourselves and with others. And the earth element within the 5 element system is associated with our soul, our spirit, our divine life force essence, right? And over the years, I've always been in such amazement and at awe at how the body, the heart, the soul innately have within them an ability to work with grief and loss energies, right? They truly can move in and ride those waves and honor what was, and also honor what wants to be, and have a space of honoring for the parts of us that are sad that something's not the way we would prefer or we would like it to be or what it was, but also engage us in that fire at the same time of what wants to come forward, right? Like they just innately have that capacity. They're not afraid of the grief and loss energies. They'll lean into them really easy. And in that way, they can help us embrace and honor with it, right? And they don't need to hold tightly to gaining a sense of security, to the stability, the predictability of, being able to project out into the future what was, and therefore trying to create that sweet spot in the middle where they have to work super hard. It's our mind. It's our mental being that is the only aspect of us that struggles. It just seriously, significantly struggles with the true partnership of working with grief and loss without an agenda. Like just letting the waves come, letting the waves go, being there, matching it, tending to what needs to be tended to, and moving when we want to we're guided to move into movement, right? Our mind wants to really keep us safe by keeping us out of unknown waters. It says unknown equals like potential pain, suffering, bad news bears. Our mental being wants our world to stay just as it is without one thing changing. And that's because it gains a sense of security and structure by taking what was, projecting it onto what is, and then being able to project that and predict on what will be there. I'm gonna pause. That was a word salad, but this word salad is the key to really helping release the mental being element within us and allowing it to come into willingness to work with all the other aspects of us that can work really easily with this. So let me break down that word salad that I said, which is that the mental being gains its sense of security by taking what was and projecting it onto what is. So that's the first part. So our system, if we're highly controlled by our mind, if we're working in, there's another really amazing pioneer in the field of working with energy system and subtle energy system by the name of, oh my gosh, Barbara Brennan. And she calls working from the mind working in the yellow because she sees the mind and the construct of that layer of our aura as a yellow, like template layer. And so she calls it working in the yellow. And so when we're working in the yellow, we are out of balance. The metal element, if I tested you with those meridians, they would be not so super happy. They'd be frozen, they'd be erratic, they'd be over energy, they'd be under energy, they'd be struggling, right? And what happens when we're working from the yellow or we're out of balance is that our mind is actually projecting a current time filter. Like imagine you've got a set of goggles on that are being changed. The way in which you can see and interact, the way you hear, the way you think, the way you smell, everything about you is being filtered based off of past circumstances, what the mind figured out to best help hold you, and it's projecting it onto the front. So you're literally, hello, not seeing what actually is there because there's a filter over top and on front of that, right? And that's just the way the mind works. So therefore, when the mental being is in charge, we're not engaging with what is present at all. We're not even engaging with the true present moment. Instead, our mind is furiously pulling all these different things from the past, rolling them together, trying to come up with the best version that it can give us that will give us a false sense of familiarity, a false sense of security, a false sense of confidence, a false sense of clarity, and really try to help us feel like, hey, we can go and be successful in this moment because we know what this moment is. But it's not truly engaging with this moment. It's pulling all these old things and morphing them together and putting them into the now moment. Now, the interesting thing is this is actually called an executive functioning skill. So like this is truly like if you go to somebody and you're like, hey, I need to work on my executive functioning skills, I need to work on, different things. This is one of them that they would work on you with, which is your ability to correlate and transpose past experiences and lessons to new moments in time, to new experiences. So take one skill and adapt it and apply it to the other. While this is a great overall function, we don't want to have to relearn how to walk in the kitchen because I learned how to walk in the living room, right? And my skill says, no, I only walk when I'm in my living room. I still crawl in the kitchen. We want that skill from our body to transfer from one place to the other and say, hey, just because I'm in a new environment, a new place, I can still take these skills and put them over there. So we want that piece there. We want that problem solving availability. However, it also means that we're running in, again, that closed system where it's not allowing any new information to come in. It's not allowing what is happening in the kitchen right now to come in. It's not allowing myself to actually customize my thoughts, my ideas, my actions, my words to meet that moment of what is the highest good and benefit for that one. Therefore, if we are working from the mental being or working from the yellow alone, and we're not allowing our heart and soul, which can meet the present moment, to guide us, then we are not living or loving in the present moment. All we're doing is living and loving from the past. And we don't get to then have current relationships. We don't get to have current conversations. We don't get to have current engagements. Every time I see somebody, I'm trying to bring them back to that point in time where my system felt confident, where my system felt secure with that being. And I don't allow it to come into a present moment to see the beautiful being that is in front of me right now in this moment, to acknowledge the growth, the shifts, the change. So everything, when we're working out of that yellow, is being engaged with a filter of past versions of ourselves and past versions of the world, right? And I'm sure you guys have experienced this. You've met somebody and you keep trying to like show them who you are in this moment, but they knew you from like 5-10 years ago, and they keep trying to bring you back to that point. And you're like, yeah, that was fun. And now let me, right? And it's really like that weird, awkward dance. And it could even happen from somebody in your office that you absolutely love and enjoy. You go out for a break, you get a phone call that changes your world up a little bit. You come back in, they're expecting you to be that same way. However, the you that's walking back in is not the same one that just walked outside for a break. And we have a moment where either we're both willing to accept that there's something new in the equation and get curious and adjust and ask and be in that attunement dance with each other, or we try to double down. Oh, I'm fine, nothing's wrong, but it doesn't match. Now, all of a sudden, we can't fully live in that moment because we're not in it, right? And the last part of that word salad is that statement that we're going to take what was and we're going to project it on what will be. So again, the mental being tries super hard to protect us. It gives us a sense of courage, of confidence to move into the unknown from its point of view into that next moment by trying to pump us up with projecting what will happen in that future. If I do this, on this day, I wore this color sock and I got this result. So now I want that result again. I'm going to wear this color sock again. It tries super hard to put and force these correlations together so it can predict what will happen in the future. But then that locks us in. It locks us into habits. It locks us into movements. It locks us into what once did all come together and bring that there. And it takes our possibilities of what can happen down to this very narrow point of view. And it blinds us like racehorses putting blinders on. It keeps us only able to see what we want to see based off of those projections, not even what's there, right? And in that moment, it really robs us of the very real choices that are available to us that might be outside of that point of view, right? And those choices might be the ones that really help us create movement towards our dreams. They're the ones that can get us unstuck from that karmic wheel, right? And help us break free from past choices and bring into new one. But if we're going to help the mental being feel secure enough to rest in the systems of the rest of our system that have the ability to work with the present, to work with the unknown, we need to help it. Trying to arm wrestle it down to the ground and tell it and force it to step back, that's just it's not helpful. It's not a kind relationship. So if we can help it trust that we in current time have the ability to meet those emotions, those hurt pieces of us, those disappointed pieces of us, those confused pieces of us, that we're going to meet in that moment while we're trying to work with the present time one. Because remember I said they vibrate together. So if we're feeling that in the present, it's going to vibrate into this tapestry of us of those past unprocessed moments, right? And can we trust ourselves to not only work with what's present, but also to be able to hold space within our system for all of that, and not desperately try to avoid or suppress or block it out of fears that somehow it's going to overwhelm our system. That's the key that we're trying to get the mental being to believe in. And so when I teach the stages of grief, I go beyond what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross teaches of the 5 stages of grief, which is denial, anger, bartering, depression, acceptance, right? I say that there is a 6th stage in the mix, and that is creation. Because after the mental element, it comes back to the beginning, comes back to water, that first element that really allows us to start to be in that stillness of that creation, releasing the form of what was and starting to gather together the threads that we want to create. And I really see working with a grief practice not as a stages, check denial, check anger, check bartering, check depression, check acceptance. Now I'm in creation. I see this more as you could guess by watching my hands this whole time, is it's moving, right? It's like a Venn diagram that's spiraling in and out. And eventually, just like that metaphor from my one client where the box get bigger, those denial and anger and bartering, depression, and even acceptance start to get smaller and smaller, and the creation of something new starts to take up more of a forefront, and the other ones just become softer, right? Less present and pushing on us. And so as we walk through working with this, there are three things that matter in the end: how well we've lived, how well we've loved, and how well we've learned the art of letting go. It really is asking us to lean in to those moments of saying, hey, our life is always going to be changing. Our life is always going to have moments that we absolutely love and want to laminate and put on the wall, and we don't want anything to change with them. And it's going to have moments where that's going to change from our own making and change from outside forces, right? And it's not as easy as trying to say, I'm here or I'm there, that it's more of this flow, just like the breath. And sometimes the breath comes in shaky. Sometimes it comes in shallow. Sometimes it comes in racing and running. And if we can acknowledge that first, get curious, what is there? What is the need behind that? Then we can soften and allow ourselves to meet what would bring more balance right now. I am no stranger to death moments. I've worked with death quite a bunch, both personally and then collectively. I have a weird niche where I work with palliative care and end of life clients. And it's one of the most beautiful ways in which I love working with clients. And then I also with my own self. And there was a moment when I was putting this together and I was remembering, like, when was this quote really talking to me? And I remember it was something that was very close to me when I was in the cancer healing journey that I was in. And at the point of the cancer healing journey, I kind of pulled back out my journal from that moment. And I was reading through it and I saw where I put this quote in there. And I was looking at that and I was thinking of what was happening. And on that day, I had journaled about a conversation that my daughter and I had had. And my oldest daughter came to me and she had asked me, she was like, Michelle, well, she didn't use Michelle. She says, Mom, I'm scared. In my journal, I talk to myself in third person point of view. And, she was like, what will happen if I die? And what will happen to her? And what will all those look like? And how will that all come in? My mom heart was having a whole moment with that. My heart for myself was having a whole moment for that. I was thinking of unbridled change and the horses that have found a sanctuary underneath the business that I created and the clients and all of these other things. And I was just having a moment. And I wrote down that I said to her, it will hurt. It will be hard. And you will live. And you will laugh. And you will grow up. And you will have moments of laughter. And you will have moments where you think of me and wish that I was there to be with you in physical form. And you're also going to have tons of moments where you don't think of me at all. And that's okay. Because you will live a full and beautiful life. And a part of me will always be with you, whether you're consciously connected with it or not. It'll be there to listen to you in the sad moments. It'll be there to cheer you on in the happy moments. It'll be there holding you. And that conversation really is when I saw my grief practice. Like, I kind of knew it was around just from everything else, but it's like at that moment, I didn't say those words. Those words were able to just channel through me. And it was this gift that in that moment, I really saw this opportunity that to fully engage with what is present, to not hide from that question, to not be embarrassed about it or push it aside or poo-poo it and be like, oh, it's going to be fine. You know, I just look like death, but it's cool. And to not meet her in that moment, to try to move her in that moment or do anything or to move myself. Instead, in that moment, what channeled through me was this incredible, we will meet it, whatever it is, however it is, whether that's 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, or 50 years from now. Whenever that time comes, we will meet it and we will be able to be there for it. And we can allow ourselves to not wait for death to fully engage us with living and loving, not wait for death to unshield our hearts so that we can love fully. You know, like in those moments, yes, we're going to have hardships and heartbreaks. Like I said back in season 1 of episodes, I think 11 and 12, bringing in that quote from Desmond Tutu. And that's not the question. The question is, are we still willing to love fully, to live fully, to engage fully in our life? And to do that is that practice of letting go. So if you would like to take a moment, just take a breath. We've covered a hard topic this time, and I even kind of questioned it. I was like, ugh, and I was like, but I can't do love without bringing in the reason why we don't love, right? I can't do compassion without bringing in the reasons why we get gummed up with compassion. And it is the biggest thing that I feel in Jack's quote when it's like, what matters most is how well we've lived and loved and let go. The biggest thing, the key, the linchpin, so to speak, if we're willing to let go of this, everything else takes care of itself, is can we let go of the expectations that we have on what we need to live and love fully? I'll say that again. This week's practice is about exploring our expectations of what we think we need in order to live and love fully. When I have this, then I can live fully. When I have this, then I can love fully. That moment with my daughter was a moment of living and loving fully not because I was all perfect. No, everything was heading in the wrong direction. That moment was there in living and loving fully in that moment by letting go of any expectations of what that moment should or shouldn't have been. Just letting it be absolutely beautiful in its messiness, just as it was. So the practice for this week is just this, to help us see where our expectations of what we what we think we need to live and love fully, and how that's preventing us from letting go so that we can be fully with what is. So let's start this practice now. Take a moment and just take a few deep breaths in and out. Allow that breath to breathe with you. And see if you can't allow that breath to breathe you. Let the breath guide you. Let it take you into your body. Let yourself feel the movement of your body. And don't worry if it's like not this huge, beautiful yoga belly breath, like wherever that breath is, we're going to accept it. So if it's at the top of your like lungs, way up here in the shoulders, and the shoulders are coming up and down, that's fine. If you can, if it feels good to welcome it deeper into the lungs, great, amazing. If not, no worries. Maybe it wants a little stretch. So my body just wants to stretch, opening up that rib cage. It wants to sigh. And what do you feel in and around your body right now? Remember, it can be things that match and things that don't match. Wiggle the feet, wiggle the hands, come to rest. And what thoughts or emotion are present right now with this theme of releasing those expectations? Who's on the bus? Who's in the peanut gallery chatting away? Chitty, chitty, chit, chat, chat. And what emotions are going with them? Maybe some that are like, oh, I want to release. And some that are like, oh, I don't know about this. What invitations and images, metaphors, ideas are coming forward from your heart being right now? Some of them might be some past pain and wounded parts of you. Some of them might be those parts that haven't been able to stretch, to dream, to think, because they've been stuck in that really narrow thinking of the mental brain. And then if it feels good to you, just inviting all those to kind of soften, step back a little bit, give you some more space. Now opening up to the insights that are coming forward from your soul being right now. With this idea of taking a moment to just notice in your life those questions. Where am I engaging fully? Where is part of me holding myself back? What do I need to let go of that can help me step into this space with more choice, more clarity, more ability to lead my authentic life? What does the soul want to share with you right now? So if it feels good to you, I invite you to allow Reiki energy and light to be with you right now in this moment. Like right now, what would be beneficial? Ask your field. What would help you soften to accept the support that's coming from the other parts of your system, from your body, from your heart, from your soul? The mental being doesn't have to hold it all by itself. And it might or might not ease that sense of hardship or heartache. And yet, allowing that support to be there means you're not alone. It can come home to your heart. What parts of you maybe feel separate, alone? And invite them. Like, come on home. You don't have to be perfect. Come just as you are. You know, come home to your body, come home to your heart, to your soul. Invite beautiful healing strands of grace to help just soften them, cleanse them, almost like that little, just smudging their field, wiping off those tears and that dust from being out there alone. And if it feels good to them at the time, they can let go. They can let go of that fear, that pain, that disappointment, that confusion, and open to the love and the acceptance, the forgiveness, the laughter and the joy that is present for you right now in this moment. And opening up with that beautiful Reiki energy to be with you throughout this week to really help you create new ways of being, of laughing and crying at the same time, of loving, of living and engaging with a life, of leading a life that is more in alignment with who you truly be. So if it feels good to use, I invite you to set this intention with me that this week to engage more fully with life, with love, and with the art of letting go. I ask for Reiki light to guide my attention this week to notice the areas in which I can say yes to an opportunity that, while scary to some parts of me, are truly what my heart and my soul are saying. Yes, take that next step. Can I say yes to it that week? And if I can't get all the way to a yes, maybe just even exploring and entertaining that yes, that might be the huge first step, right? Can I say yes to lingering a moment with a loved one? Just being with them exactly as they are, exactly as I am, no agenda, not trying to change anybody, just pausing a moment, lingering in that hug, having them next to you, giving them a little extra emoji through a text, whatever feels good, just letting yourself be in that love. And then the let go. I ask for Reiki attention to help guide my attention to the ways that I can let go of an expectation or of a past pain or hurt that are blocking me from being able to be present with what is right now, and therefore the choices that are available to me right now. Help direct my flow of thoughts so that I can engage with the gift of letting go, so that I can engage with the soul medicines of trust, hope, courage, living and loving. Trust that I have the ability to meet life as it is and courage to believe in my ability to live and love well. And so it is. Peace, peace, peace. Okay, so this is my soulful practice for the next week. I hope you will join me on this art of letting go of what was so I can fully live and love with what is present and what wants to be. Until next time, offering you light, love, and joy on your journey, Michelle Holling-Brooks with Unbridled Change. Bye. Thank you for listening to Soulful Practices. For more information on how to work directly with me or one of my guests, check out the show notes below. We'd love for you to also let us know what parts of this episode are speaking to you and how this practice is supporting you on your healing and spiritual journey. Please share this podcast with fellow seekers, travelers. Together, we can create a wave of soul-led beings in this world, offering you light, love, and joy on your journey. Michelle Holling-Brooks. Until next time.